current events and how...
Oh, we're having technical difficulties.
You're listening to Southern Miss Radio. It's time for News You Need. News You Need is a look at current events and how they affect the college community and beyond. And now here's the host of News You Need, Dr. Ed Simpson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting edition of News You Need. This is the show where we talk to the best human beings in the whole world, which is our USM students. And we have another great panel here today. So why are we here? Well, this is the show where we talk about what's in the news, and the reason we care, of course, is that as citizens of a society, we need to know what issues are out there so we can figure out what decisions need to be made, things like the ballot box, issues that are confronting our community, all those kinds of things. And the single best and only way, really, to understand what is coming at us as a society is to read, consume, and think about, and hopefully occasionally talk about the news. So let's get going, and let's do this. Let's introduce yourselves, if you would. Tell us who you are, what group I know you represent a group, Sarah, what year you're in, maybe what your major is, and we'll take it from there.
Hi, I am Sarah Munn. I'm a sophomore here at USM. I'm a communication studies major, and I'm here representing the Communication Studies Student Association.
Yay, we love our student association. I am the faculty advisor, the alleged faculty advisor to the group. Do we got anything coming up?
Yes, we do. We have a new member meeting where we're going to have vision boards, and we're going to make the vision boards for our academic, social, and professional aspirations and careers. And that'll be February 27th at 6:30 p.m. in room 201 in College Hall.
What time?
At 6:30 p.m.
6:30 p.m. on the 27th.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Am I there? Am I supposed to? Okay,
yeah,
excellent.
You'll be there.
I'm supposed to be there. Okay, excellent.
Hi, my name is Lily Burgard. I am a freshman here at USM. I'm a digital journalism major. I don't represent any groups, though.
Oh, that's
I'm
okay.
just representing me.
Yeah, just yourself. Nothing wrong with that.
Hello, I'm Annabella Laird. I am a freshman communication studies major here at USM, and I'm also representing myself.
Well, hopefully you guys will join some groups soon, so
yeah.
you can jump on there and be a representative of them. So what are our USM students talking about? What's going on in our circles? What's big news to our USM students?
I think a big thing we're talking about is the current administration.
Yeah,
Really?
I was just about to say.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
definitely.
oh yeah.
Real, I'm shocked. So our students are paying attention
Yes.
to what's going on in DC and beyond.
You don't really have a choice these days.
Yeah,
That is true, especially with social media.
Especially
and
with
stuff.
social media. It's
You
just
see it
thrown
whether
in
you
your
want
face
to
every
or
day.
not. Yeah.
I agree.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
So what in particular is breaking through the haze here? What issues that you're seeing with our current administration?
Most recently, one that's been really worrying to me is that they took all mentions of transgender people out of the Stonewall Monument, which is a monument to transgender people, specifically the people that threw bricks and rioted to get their rights have now been completely taken out of their own monument.
And some of the leaders of the Stonewall riot were transgender,
Transgender.
so it takes away a big part of that movement. And I agree. I don't know if you guys also saw on the White House website, they've taken away all mention of transgender individuals, which is very demeaning and patronizing. So.
And they've halted all studies that have any keywords such as assigned male at birth, assigned female at birth, things of that nature. They've halted, the government scientists are not running studies on anything like that. No brain studies, nothing.
They also asked all of the White House officials to take the pronouns out of their email signatures as well, which is small as kind of compared to the other things, but it's just kind of showing how the culture of the whole thing is shifting and changing in a really weird way.
Yeah, and the little things build up.
Exactly,
and I think people don't
exactly.
realize that when they consume the news. They're like, oh, it's just small. It's a small thing. It's like it's building up to
Because
become a
it's
bigger
so
issue.
many small
Yes.
things.
Exactly.
Oh, and then we have the Gulf of America now.
Yeah, it says Gulf of America on Apple
Well, wait a minute.
Maps.
Aren't you guys seriously oh my gosh, isn't this awesome? We now have the Gulf of America. You guys aren't saying that?
No, I'm never going to call it that.
I think it's kind of silly because if you look at It's funny. It's if you look at the America version of Apple Maps, it says Gulf of America. But if you look at it from any other country, it says Gulf of Mexico. So it kind of makes us look a little silly, I feel like.
Well, now the Associated Press, which now you guys you might be familiar with it a little bit. The Associated Press is sort of the Bible of the news industry, where if you have a question about how you refer to something, you look it up in the AP Style book. AP Style announced last week they would not change it, that it will be the Gulf of Mexico, according to Associated Press Style, which most news outlets follow AP Style. And the reasoning is that one country cannot dictate what a body of water that borders 5 or 6 countries is called. So if Cuba, Mexico, and what other countries border the Gulf? That's how ignorant I am of geography. But if they all agreed to call it the Gulf of America, then AP would change its style. But barring that, they're not going to.
I also saw that the Associated Press was barred from entering a White House event for that reason.
That is correct.
I saw that as well.
Good guy, good job. Yeah, I love that. That's a pretty obscure story, but I mean, it got attention there for a day or two. That was great. So talk to me a little bit about how, okay, so this, you're exactly right. The LGBTQ mentions have been actually deleted from the entire federal government web operation. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of web pages were removed from the Centers for Disease Control, from the Department of Health and Human Resource, all that kind of stuff. Things that refer to DEI, LGBTQ, all those kinds of things. How are our students feeling, especially since you guys are communication majors, how are you guys feeling about that, and what does that mean in the big picture?
I think it really affects us as humans because we identify with labels so much, and it helps, I think, what's the right word for this? I think it helps define us, and that's just who we are as humans. And so to take away that, it's really dehumanizing, I think.
I think it's also just scary because, right now it's just LGBTQ people, and I think that so quickly that can spread to other groups of people, them taking their, us being able to see what's happening with different groups of people will be taken away.
And I think even that, it goes beyond just labels. I think even so soon we're seeing tangible effects of this administration. I know I have a transgender friend who recently tried to get his name legally changed and was denied because the reason was he was transgender.
That's where I was heading. So the tangible effects of this, now we know as professional journalists, communicators, that language matters, that messaging matters. And so what is the federal government saying to transgender folks, to gay folks, to even African Americans when you talk about DEI and everything, right?
And women.
Well, of course, and
All
women. Yeah.
Every woman, they want a society that is just complete straight white males. And it's scary for every group because then they're also messing with the Department of Education. Mm-hmm. And once you get into DEI and you take away the Department of Education, it seems like they don't want anyone to be educated on what they're doing. It's just a quick decline into something really terrifying.
It definitely feels like we're going back
exactly.
instead of forward.
And so fast.
Yeah.
In a month.
Yeah.
I know, it's really scary how quickly change is happening and not in a good way.
Yeah.
And I think specifically for transgender people, they're essentially being told that they don't exist, that being transgender isn't real. And I think that is incredibly dehumanizing and really scary.
That's kind of where I was headed. I was kind of draw out from you guys a little bit. This idea of disappearing whole groups of human beings.
I think it reminds me a lot of, this is a jump, but what happened with the Nazi Party and how they tried to, how they did essentially erase the Jewish population out of Germany. I feel like it's happening much slower and less dramatic, but I think that's essentially what's happening here, is they're trying to erase.
You're not the only one that has drawn that analogy. And we are going to take a break. And actually, we're gonna pick up with this really interesting, dark analogy on the other side.
Sponsorship comes from American Graphics. Located at 8 Commercial Warehouse Drive in Hattiesburg, American Graphics provides custom screen printing and embroidery. They can be reached by phone at 601-602-2277. And the website is goamericangraphics.com. American Graphics, printing at its finest.
Estos son los sonidos de una cena que casi no sucedió. Es una cena servida gracias a personas como tú. Debido a la crisis actual, 50 millones de personas pueden vivir con hambre este año. Feeding America está ayudando a los que más lo necesitan. Y si quieres, tú puedes ayudar también. Visita feedingamerica.org/en-español. Patrocinado por el Ad Council y Feeding America, la fuerza de 200 bancos de alimentos.
What direction we were going to be taking, or like, oh,
Okay, and we are back, and we took the conversation. Well, what started dark got a little darker right before the break, and I did kind of want to stay on that a little bit. All of this leads to this idea of the climate that we're living in. And now there's one side of the argument that says, hey, this is what the country voted for. Donald Trump made no secret. Project 2025 made no secret about this is what he wants to do with the federal government and the direction of the country. He won the election. Now, granted, it was by 212,000 votes across 5 or 6 states. So it was a pretty close, it's always a pretty close election the last 20 or so years. But the country voted for this. Is that a legit viewpoint?
I think that most people who voted for him did so for an economic reason because they were ignorant of his actual policies. They thought that as soon as he got in office, he would lower their groceries and their gas and that they would have the golden prices that they want. They would have the golden America that they want. They wouldn't have... Specifically, I feel like he preyed on poor white people, saying, y'all's voice has been taken away, y'all's prices have been raised by Democrats. I'm going to come in and I'm going to fix that for you. I'm going to fix those prices. And then he came in, he put tariffs on everything, and he raised them. So I feel like a lot of people are actually pretty unsatisfied with his work so far because their prices have only gone up.
that's another thing. I know personally that a lot of people that I just know that are more apolitical or don't really get into it just defaulted to vote for Donald Trump because he had been president before. And I think that's a population that makes up a lot more of America than people realize.
Really? Okay.
That, well, he was already president and America was fine. So we're just gonna vote for him again.
Well, I was around when he was president the first time. Fine is a pretty generous.
That's why I hesitated.
I think a lot of it is that so many people were younger when he was, like, this is my first time ever voting. I was 12 years old when Donald Trump was elected.
Oh, wow. You guys are so young.
And a lot of us, like, you know, a lot of people who don't really follow the news, they just heard what their parents said and then voted. And so I think the biggest issue throughout history has always been an uneducated voter. Because we live in a democracy, this was our doing. But it wasn't everybody's fault that they were uneducated when they voted. I think a big problem is that we don't come together as a community and want to help each other and educate each other. So things like this don't happen.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that to segue from what you were saying about voter education, so not only are people ignorant of the policies of each candidate, they also were ignorant on how to register, where to go. And I know so many students on this campus had no idea. They thought they were going to be able to vote. Then it got to October. They realized it had been too late. They couldn't register anymore. They realized they didn't even know where to go to vote. So they just thought it would be easier to stay home. So many kids our age just didn't vote at all. And I also think to do with people voting for Donald Trump, I don't think Kamala had enough campaign time. She had like 3 months. Failed her in a crazy way.
And we could certainly, and I actually will do it for hours and hours and days, if you want to relitigate the last election. And the fact that President Biden did promise to be a one-term transitional candidate and then decided not to.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And then didn't drop out of the race.
And then did not, and then he said, okay, I changed my mind, I'm running.
Oh, that's interesting.
And the Democratic apparatus, of course, got behind him as the sitting president. And then the first debate, very clear he was not up for the job.
No.
And then Kamala stepped in. I don't know. It's all very interesting. Let me, you're saying uninformed. Mm-hmm. Is it possible that the people were informed and they said, I'm totally fine with pushing transgender back into the shadows, with ending DEI and making sure that African Americans do not have a a leg up in this world. That there's a certain group of population.
Oh, absolutely.
Unfortunately, there were a group, but what I have seen around me has been the complete opposite. It's just been uninformed voters, especially in the South. That is a huge issue in the South, and that is what I've seen around me. And I've seen regret since then, since they voted for Donald Trump.
Regret is interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I will say at USM, our students seemed very much engaged before the election and very much behind Kamala.
Yes.
And how is that translated after the election?
I've found there's been a lot of, especially in all of Hattiesburg, not just USM, but I remember in days after the election, a lot of organizations I'm aware of and sometimes visit, support groups, and a lot of, it's almost sort of like the community really has sort of like clung together and be
Yes.
like, we're going to make spaces for people where they feel safe, where they can vent, where they can release their frustration, where we can find joy in this time in a way.
Exactly.
I feel like that's mainly been the response that I've seen.
Really?
Yeah.
A lot of community outreach, places like the Spectrum Center, groups on campus, just giving people a place to go when they're scared
Yeah.
of what's going on in the world.
I agree. I think for me personally, it was a shock when Trump won because I think we've all been kind of stuck in this echo chamber of like Kamala Harris was going to win
Yes.
because we're college students and we,
Yeah.
supported her. And so it was like, when I woke up the next morning, I was like, how did this happen?
I had the
But then I
chills.
realized that I was in a situation and in a space where I was hearing one thing, but the rest of the world was thinking another.
Yeah.
That was also really shocking for me.
Yeah.
What really surprised me is, if I recall correctly, Trump historically had one of the lowest approval ratings of any president, and he didn't even win the popular vote in the first election. So the fact that he did in this one really surprised me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to say I was not surprised that I was this big savvy, media observer. And I was surprised too.
Yeah.
I was looking at all the polls. I was my theory was, and I was proven completely wrong, that just as in Trump's first election victory, we were all surprised because his core base was always undercounted in the polls. My theory was Kamala's core base, which would be young people, were undercounted in the polls because you guys are notoriously hard to poll because you don't answer a phone number that you don't know. You don't answer email.
We
You're
don't
just,
do polls.
You don't do polls.
Takes
You're
too
just
long.
watching, I guess, TikTok all day. So it's really hard to get to you. So that was my theory. I was completely wrong.
That makes sense, though. I get why you thought that. Because
Yeah,
I don't
well,
take
and
like polls.
it wasn't completely uninformed. There was some good science out there that says that, but I think everybody underestimated Trump's core support. That it's much bigger than we thought it was.
I think everybody always underestimates Trump and everything that he does because I think he paints himself in this light, but then he's actually someone much more complex.
I think it
And-
also but I think it also has to do with a lot of, I don't know how to put this, like optimism and hope, like, oh, he's not actually that powerful and it's not really this bad. And then you're like, oh, maybe it is. I think people were just trying to be optimistic, and then you're like, oh, never mind.
And like I think you were saying, underestimating people, I think we also underestimate how much hate people have.
Yeah.
And how easy it is to turn angry and bitter people against certain groups, and how easy it is to gain support when you're being mean. I think people want to feel free to be mean.
Well, I think the best way to also gather support is to have a common enemy. And so to villainize certain groups of people is the best way he could have gotten support, and that's how he did it.
Exactly. I think for too long with woke culture, people have felt like they have to be nice, they have to be kind, they have to think about others. And I think there's just a giant population in this country that wants to treat people terribly and be free to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to. So that's kind of the big overarching kind of existential question of our time right now: is have we unleashed the worst parts of human nature?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
So what? So okay. So if we have, what's the hope? What's left? What do we do? How do we? Can we put it back? Should we put it back in the bottle?
I think that the founding fathers of this country set up a democracy and they set up principles and a constitution, and we just have to hope that that can still be intact and that we can rely on that democracy and, how our government's lasted a long time, not as long as others, but a long time, and we just have to hope in the institution and hope that it all works out.
And
Yeah.
you have to have faith that people will choose to be kind eventually. I don't think that people are naturally mean. I think that they're very angry and that they feel hurt. And so we've given them this way to be mean, but that doesn't mean that's who they are. So I think we just have to have faith that they will come to terms with their own kindness and goodness and see the hurt that they're causing people.
I have a lot less complex answer, but a lot of people I know are just like, well, he can't get elected again. So after 4 years, let's just hope things get kind of back on track.
Well, he hasn't exactly been faithful to the Constitution thus far.
Yeah.
Well, so what you're referring to is the idea of the guardrails, right? Will the guardrails of democracy hold? And that is another existential question. And then there's the other ongoing existential questions of, can we only be kind to each other if eggs are $3.12 a dozen?
That's so true.
I mean, if it goes up to $5 a dozen, do we start hating each other?
Yes.
I guess
yes.
so.
Yes, well,
I guess we do. I don't know.
I
It's
think when
clearly-
people are uncomfortable in their position in society, that makes them a little bit meaner as people. Like, unless they're comfortable with their economic standpoint, with their family, with their job, that's the only way that they're going to maintain kindness.
And- Oh, sorry. Just segueing off of that, I really liked what you just said because you mentioned like the idea of like woke culture earlier, and I think that made a lot of people really uncomfortable with their standing in society, especially people who had been prejudiced and were kind of being forced to reckon things with themselves. So I think going way into the other way of like hate and vitriol and prejudice is almost sort of comforting to people that are like, no, I don't have to change. I don't have to look inward and try and be a better person, because that's hard for people. So I think that's kind of why it's swung so far the other way now, is because people don't really like to reckon with the fact that maybe they've done something wrong.
I agree with that. I also think that people who have long held positions of power, like white people, white men, they want to keep that. And it was going in a direction to where more people could hold power, and I think that that terrifies a certain population. I think that that really makes them scared and angry and want to push everyone that was gaining power back down. They want to maintain their position. So I think that that's another reason that it's become so prevalent to just be hateful.
You guys are bumming me out.
It's Valentine's Day.
It's Valentine's Day. It's
Happy
all
Valentine's
everybody
Day.
love each other. It's Valentine's Day. Well, here's the thing. I say this. I am incredibly lucky as a human being. I get to be with you guys every day. That gives me hope. That gives me energy. That gives me optimism. I wish everybody had a group of delightful young people in their lives to have these kinds of discussions. It's really interesting. So let's talk about a couple of headlines in the news that maybe will bring us back to the guardrail question here a little bit. So here's one. I don't know if our USM students are paying attention to this or not. New York Times, Trump officials demand in Adams case forces Justice Department showdown. So now this is a sleeper story. Now it's all over the news. Have you guys heard about this at all?
I don't think so.
Have you?
Oh,
okay.
I haven't.
Well, we're going to take a break, and we'll pick up with the Eric Adams case on the other side.
Southern Miss Student Media is how USM communication students put their education into action. The student prints, Southern Miss Radio, SMTV, and SM2 Creative are the media properties operated by Southern Miss Student Media. You can get your share of the more than $600 million USM brings to the area with help from Southern Miss Student Media. To find out more about how to reach the USM audience, email sm2sales@usm.edu.
Uh-oh, Brad's buzzed.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he's starting with the woots. And now a speech.
I just want to say that friendship is about heart and brain. Who's with me?
Good thing is, he knows when he's buzzed.
And my brain is saying, when it's time to go home, somebody call me a ride.
Love that guy.
Me too.
Know your buzzed warning signs? Call for a ride when it's time to go home. Buzz driving is drunk driving. A message from NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Okay, we are back. So guardrails, and so this is the case of the mayor of New York City The Trump Justice Department, under new leadership, Pam Bondi et al., and ordered the criminal case against the mayor dropped. The U.S. attorney in New York refused and resigned. They then turned it over to lawyers in Washington in the Justice Department, and 5 of them resigned, and nobody would drop the case. And the argument they made was, you're giving us no reasons other than political. No facts have changed. The law has not changed. What we're supposed to do has not changed. You're just making a pure political argument. So ethically, we can't do what you're asking us to do. And they said, well, if you don't, you're fired. And they said, well, we resign. So talk about now that's the idea of guardrails. So you're saying there might be a little hope because you have principled folks saying, I can't do this? Do we expect not 3 million federal employees to resign?
No.
No, but it's nice to know that there are some people in power who are. Well, it's nice to know there are some people in power who are not for this. It's a little. I get why they did it. It's a little disheartening that they're no longer in power. That they're being forced to resign. Essentially, that is scary, but it's also somewhat comforting to know that they still exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's really nice to know that there are people who will stand up for what they believe in and what they think is right and what is ethical and what's genuinely in the laws of our country for us to do. I do think it's terrifying that they're being immediately pushed out. Anyone who shows any faith to their actual country and doesn't just kiss the ring of Donald Trump is immediately pushed out.
Yeah, I think there's a word for that.
Yeah, exactly.
And
We're going to skip around it.
I guess my hope is that those people who have morals and will stand behind what they believe in will band together and fight for what they believe in and not just resign and then get another job and never talk about it again. I hope that everybody will come together eventually and fight the injustices that are happening in our country right now.
I do believe that if you really do push hard enough, there will be a resistance and people will fight back. I'm just not sure how hard that push is going to have to be for people to really get with it. I don't know.
Who it's going to have to affect.
Yeah, it's going to have to really be something, which is scary. But
Yeah. Well, what is fascinating is that there were people who were literally screaming at the tops of their lungs on the rooftop saying, this is what's going to happen. And the guy won the election anyway.
I was one of those people.
Yes.
There you go. And that brings you some comfort, right? That you say, okay, I was right. I told you this was going to. But there is an election in less than 2 years. Are USM students focused on that?
I am.
Are you really?
Yes.
Excellent.
I would say I am as well. I haven't really heard it from the USM population at large. I think they're kind of focused on what's happening right now. But I think as we get closer to that time, that'll probably become a more hot topic.
Yeah. So this would be the congressional election where, the Democrats are now 3 seats away from the majority in the House of Delegates. And approximately, this is how, I should have looked this up, at least half of them are up for election in 2 years. The other half would be up in the following 2 years. So there you go. So you guys have been amazing. What a great show. Really appreciate it. And so let's hang in there, right? We're going to be upbeat and positive, and there is a ray of hope. We don't know where it is, but we'll find it. And certainly check in at News You Need, and we'll point it out to you occasionally. So this has been a production of Southern Miss Student Media. Our videographer is Isabella Michaud. Thank you. Our engineer is Kylie Keenan. Thank you. And we will be back next week.
This has been News You Need with Dr. Ed Simpson. News You Need airs Friday afternoon at 12:30 on Southern Miss Radio.